You're listening to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher.
Welcome to episode 10. We are officially in the double digits. Do you feel that? It's big. I'm here with your friendly reminder to like, follow, subscribe, do all the things. You can find out how at todaysmama.com/podcast. I'm also here with a word to the wise. Free Museum Day is happening soon, so mark your calendars for September 22nd, 2018. You can get all the details on todaysmama.com. I'll throw a link in the show notes. And in the meantime, enjoy this episode with my long-lost twin, Allie Edwards.
Today we're talking to Allie Edwards. Mostly she's made of magic. She's the Allie behind allieedwards.com. You may know her because of her memory keeping product lines and workshops. Now let's be clear, it's memory keeping, not scrapbooking. She's got two different Instagram accounts that I'm obsessed with, at Allie Edwards and at AE_wellness. Both amazing. Most importantly, she has the best and coolest handwriting on the face of planet Earth. Welcome, Allie, to the Today's Mama podcast.
That was so great. Thanks.
Holy cats. It's been so long. We determined it has been 5 years since we've seen each other's face.
Yes. But it doesn't feel that bad because of social media, I think.
Yeah.
You can kind of keep up with what you got going on, stuff like
that.
Yeah,
I agree. Can we talk a little bit about last time we saw each other then?
Yeah.
Because that was an eventful little weekend.
Yes, it was amazing. I was actually just looking at the pictures recently. So fun.
So for our listeners, we host this thing called Click Retreat, which is like a photography focused and social media focused retreat for bloggers. And this one that Allie and I were at together that we were hosting was in Outer Banks, North Carolina. And it was like a series of unfortunate events. So it sounds to me like your immediate reaction was like, oh yeah, it was so great. So like,
yeah, I don't remember all of the issues.
So let's list off a few of the things maybe that happened and see if I can refresh your memory. So first of all, we get there and there is a legitimate nor'easter storm. Do you remember that?
Yes. Now I do. You're talking
Going
about.
to dinner that night, the first night, there's just like waves coming up over. It just looked crazy. And the word nor'easter, it's just like scary to me. So that made it worse. We started with that. There was a government shutdown. So all those excursions we had planned, like going to these different lighthouses and parks.
Yes.
And then there was even one more event that happened that not many people witnessed, but we had accidentally started a fire on the front porch and almost blew up the minivan we'd rented.
This is amazing.
I know. And that whole trip, I kept like grilling you on your hot boyfriend too. Like I still can't even connect with his real name because all I call him is hot boyfriend.
Yes, his name is Aaron and he's my husband now.
I know, but I'm still going to have to call him hot boyfriend. Sorry.
You can call him that. I call him that. I call him hot boyfriend.
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to talk more about him in a little bit. I have to reverse back in time before we go down the hot boyfriend road.
Yeah.
Because one thing, when we were in North Carolina, I determined that I felt that we could be sisters from another mister. So I want to test my theory a little bit.
Okay.
And I need to know more about what you were like as a little kid. So
Okay.
my question is, were you a tomboy?
I definitely skewed that direction.
Okay, describe yourself. Like, give me a little snapshot of Allie as a little kid.
I was very athletic. So definitely like played soccer. I swam competitively. We played golf. My parents made me play golf. I didn't want to play golf, but I definitely now know how to play golf.
I'm making my daughter play
Are you?
golf
Yeah.
right now.
And I think that it's not, I mean, when I was doing it, I didn't want to be doing it because I just thought it was just agonizingly boring, which swimming is actually the same way, but I liked swimming better.
Yeah.
But we lived on a golf course or really close to a golf course. And so they just felt like this is something that you need to know how to do. And my dad was actually a really good player, still is a good player. And so that was just a thing. They were like, this will serve you in your life, even if you don't love it. You know, like someday you will have business meetings on the golf course, or you may potentially, or your husband will have, they're more traditional. So, but yeah, I mean, I was definitely into sports.
Yeah.
I liked school though, too. Like I definitely enjoyed learning. That's something that's carried on throughout my life, but had more friends that were boys, I would say, than friends that were girls for sure. Yep.
You basically just described me, except for I chose some different sports too.
Yeah.
So I was a really good student, but also, so I played soccer, I played softball. In college, I ended up playing lacrosse, but I played a lot of sports. I got along better with boys than girls for the most part. I got in a few fist fights.
No, I didn't. That did not happen for me though.
Okay.
So yes.
I leveled up a little. There was a point in my life where I had a bowl cut.
That's awesome. Oh yeah, no, we actually have a picture. So I have two siblings. I'm the oldest. And then I have a brother that's about 15 months younger than me. And then a sister who is about 4 years younger. And we have a family picture of the five of us where when people look at the picture, we all look like boys. Like we all had boy haircuts, and they'll be like, oh, are those your brother? All the boys. I'm like, no.
I'm going to put this in the show notes. Can we each submit our bowl cut picture?
Oh yeah, I will. I'll totally look for it. I'll see if I can find it.
So when I had my bowl cut, I too looked like a boy. And I also, and I'm not calling you a compulsive liar. I'm just saying I was a compulsive liar. So I'm not saying we shared that in common. So because I had a bowl cut and I looked so much like a boy, there was a new kid at school. And I told him
that you were a boy.
I told him my name was Keith. And I was from Australia. And
so did you work the accent in there too?
Oh, I worked the accent for like a week.
Nice.
And then he saw me go in the girls' bathroom and I was like, ah!
I think I was less assertive than that. I was still assertive, but yes, yeah. That's awesome.
Okay, so then tell me this. I sent you a video clip before we got on this call because I ask every guest this question. And then for any new listeners, I will always have a link in the show notes so you can watch the same video clip. It's from the movie Ratatouille. And the question is, what's your Ratatouille or the smell of your childhood? Like it could be Fruity Pebbles while you're watching your Saturday morning cartoons. I don't know. But what takes you back?
So I had two immediate things come to mind. One is just chlorine because we swam all the time. Like that was just a consistent thing throughout childhood. So anytime I am in a pool or anytime I walk into a pool building, like that definitely takes me back. The other thing I thought of, which is super random, is hot dogs on the stove on Sundays. So my dad, it was like, that was the thing, like on Sundays lunchtime, like after he'd been working in the yard and we'd had chores that we had to do out in the yard. And he's a great gardener, tons of flowers and is always outside. He would come in and he would cook hot dogs on the stove, like in water. And whatever that smell is, hot dogs cooking in water on the stove paired with a Coke there was always a Coke. And, some kind of chips or something. That's like a very, that meal and or the smell related to that. There are times even now, like on Sundays where I'll be like, oh, feels like it's time for a hot dog, which I'm not eating that. But, it's still like that definitely takes me back.
I'll tell you what that smell is. It's called 1986.
Yeah.
We could bottle that.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that. And I can totally relate to the smell of chlorine. I would say that has a Ratatouille moment for me, which is probably more junior high and high school, where I'll also admit to you that I joined the synchronized swimming team for a minute.
Amazing. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Yes.
Yeah. Like my friend and I just decided, let's mix things up.
Yeah. I love that.
Who's trying to kill it in the medley? Let's synchronize swim.
How did that go?
I was a beast. I feel like I did a really great job. We won nothing. When I say when I was a beast, that means we didn't do very well at all.
But you liked it. You had fun.
It was super fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's another thing that we twin at that when you submitted, I make everybody fill out like this pre-interview form. So this might be the most important thing is you love Dave Matthews Band.
I do.
I love Dave Matthews Band.
Here's my Dave story. So I love Dave in college. So I went to Oregon State.
And I loved him in college too.
Yes, which was, kind of the prime, right? Of what, I still love him now. So
yes,
that was kind of the prime. And so I have great memories of listening to him in college. I didn't ever see him, or go to any concerts or anything at that time, but listening like Satellite and that Under the Table and Dreaming.
Yes.
And then this is a horrible story, but Chris, who was my first husband, and I were camping. I think this is after we got married, if I remember right. So we got married in 1998 and we went camping with a couple of friends of ours and we had a new dog, a puppy that, well, he was probably a year old by that time, but it was a dog that Chris liked to do like hunt test training and hunt trials with, this is a black lab dog that we had gotten. And so we'd put a bunch of money in this dog to have him trained, and he was an amazing dog. And this is like our first baby. And we went camping, and we didn't realize how close we were to a highway. And like we were sitting around the campfire, and the dog was kind of running around, and we were blasting Dave, and the dog ended up getting run over. And it was horrible. Like it was one of the most traumatic experiences I probably had in my life. And Chris's parents came and picked us up, and we had to take the dog back. And so I didn't listen to Dave after that for years.
Oh my gosh.
For years and years, until I met Aaron. And Aaron, who is my husband now, is like super Dave fan.
Yeah.
And had been going to all these shows at the Gorge in the state of Washington. Dave usually does 3 shows a summer, and you camp. And so now I think we're going in a couple weeks, and that will be my 4th time going, I think. So we've seen Dave at the Gorge a number of times. And then we've also gone to Mexico to see Dave a couple times now.
I'm still working on breathing again after.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's a horrible story, but it's like part of my Dave story of this, it was something I was totally into, and then something like I just couldn't bear to listen to for years until this next chapter started. And then it's like all Dave all the time. I was actually just listening to his new record before I got on here with you too. So.
I was too, because you sent me down this path, and I pulled up Dave Matthews did a Tiny Desk performance on NPR.
So good.
I almost started weeping.
I probably listened to it 50 times.
I just put it on repeat. His voice, it's the voice of an angel.
Yeah, no, I'm a total groupie for sure. Like ridiculous groupie now.
Yeah. And also just, so I can continue our streak of twinning. You had a little chocolate lab, rest in peace. I have a yellow lab, but he is really old. He's 13, so I may be mourning him shortly. And at that point, maybe I'll go on hiatus from Dave just out of respect.
Yeah, well, that's totally possible. And I've actually had 3 labs. We've had 2 more since then that have both passed away for, other reasons that weren't as traumatic.
Yeah.
One was older when we got him and had a heart condition that we knew about, but he was like a person. He was his name was Wyatt.
Aww.
Yeah, he's a good dog.
Yeah.
So now I have 3 cats.
Okay, I just was talking about getting a cat this week, and then I heard somebody say the words wet food.
We don't do wet food.
And I threw up in my mouth a little bit, and I canceled all of my cat intentions.
Yeah. We do dry food.
Okay, so there's an option.
Yeah, there's an option.
Okay, because that really freaked me out.
You're listening to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher. We'll be back right after this.
For breakfast, you ate one stale goldfish you found in the car seat. Your hair is still sticky from last night's applesauce hands. You have to pick up dry cleaning, go to the store, unclog Mr. Fuzzy from the toilet, and then get the kids from school. You deserve something easy. Now you can automatically create 60-page photo books straight from your phone's camera roll and social media for just $10 with free shipping. Time flies. Hang on to every weird, wild moment with Chatbooks.
And now back to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher.
So we've talked about some really fun things. We've talked about growing up, our twinness, which I still believe we're cut from the same cloth. But let's talk about divorce a little bit, because I feel like that's kind of an important backstory for some of the other questions I'm going to ask you and the rest of the conversation. So you talked about your first husband and your little puppy together, but you mentioned a couple quotes that I really liked, or I should say life lessons. So I'm gonna read them back to you. And then I just want to maybe find out how your divorce kind of impacted you and maybe taught you some of these life lessons. So the first thing you said was people make it through things. And that's something that your parents have shown you. And the second thing you said was live the length and the width of life. So the second one about living the length and the width is the mantra that helped me, meaning you, through divorce. And you said you were very intentional about not stuffing feelings, but actually feeling them so as to not have them come back at another time in life. Talk about that. Talk about divorce and all the feelings that come with it and how you got through it.
Yeah.
Really big, long question.
Yeah, no, that's good. Also, a little backstory. So we met in college.
Yeah.
And we are both, I would say, kind of type A. We were both involved in a lot of different leadership things in college. We had a lot of fun together. So I would say definitely had a strong friendship base, obviously, before getting married. You would have that, or you would hope that you would have that. And we got married in 1998, and our son, Simon, was born in 2002. And Simon was diagnosed with autism when he was about 2.5. So we started the process of kind of having him evaluated when he was 2 and was not bringing words together. And I bring that up, just Simon, because that was our first child. We didn't know any different. It was very hard, I think harder than we imagined it would be. And we had a lot of, let's see, how do I say this? Like, I think that we both really wanted to be independent, but we both needed to take care of this child. Obviously, and he is the brightest light, I would say, in both of our lives for sure. He's 16 now, which is amazing. But I think that was a really hard piece in our marriage. And a lot of that, he required a lot of care, and a lot of emotional energy went into, especially in those early years of caring for him. And over time, I think that we grew apart. Chris and I grew apart in some fundamental ways. And I think some fundamental things were missing. And this is me talking 6 years later, right? Or 7 years later from the time we got a divorce. So I have a lot more perspective on it. In the moment, he was the one that decided that he wanted to leave, and it was brutal. And I didn't understand, and it was just shattered everything. And by that time we had a 2-year-old also. It was really, really hard. And I was also really, really lucky that he is a tremendously good person. And we talked so much through the process. We decided to have a mediator, and by another luck or whatever, we stumbled upon, or someone was recommended to us, that I would credit him in leading us through the process. Also, he was a really, really good mediator, and he's kind of become a friend to both of us. And he was able to, I think, help us be really intentional with how we went through the process. And I mean, I literally remember even being in the middle of the sadness of sitting there and talking to him, and us saying out loud that we were going to make it through this, that we were going to be friends. And that even if it was hard to imagine that at that point in time, that our goal through this entire process was going to be that we were going to get along, and we were going to be happy, and, life was going to move forward, and we were going to take care of our kids. And, having that really specific intention, I think, really helped us. And the fact that that was what we both wanted. If you're going through a divorce and you are wanting that, but your partner isn't, it's going to be a lot harder, I think. And in that point, you have to just be able to rely on yourself and let things go. And I mean, there's a lot of that even now. Like, this is not a perfect situation, right? There's a lot of things that, because we have this very specific intention about how we want our relationship to be, we let lots of things go that maybe we wouldn't have if we weren't really clear on how we want this relationship to be and how we want to take care of our kids. So the living the length and the width part really came through for me as I was experiencing this really deep, deep sadness of losing my reality, losing what I thought, how I thought things were supposed to go, or how I thought things were supposed to look. So there's a lot of grief that goes into that. And one of the things that helped me was being able to talk to Chris about it. And I really do give him a lot of credit, because he gave me the opportunity to sit with me, and I could get really mad, and he allowed me to be mad, and he allowed me to get out the feelings of frustration that I was having, and the, not understanding what was going on, and those kinds of things. And if I would go too far, which I did sometimes, he would say, okay, you've gone too far, then we would kind of readjust. And it didn't mean it was perfect, and it didn't mean I was happy when I left, but I was able to get those feelings out rather than internalizing them. And I could have done that with a therapist, right? And I did see a therapist at different points in the process. But in this case, I think it helped us that I was able to say the things that I needed to say to him as we worked through what it was going to look like down the road. And, that just dealing with all of the stuff and the money and the kids and the parenting time and all of these things that come into it that are just crazy. And so for me, the length and the width.
It's tangly. There's so much there.
Yes. Oh, so yes, the detangling is really, really challenging. And depending on what your family situation looks like, it can be more or less challenging. And, it's all relative to each individual person. So that the length and the width really came about for me in realizing too that this wasn't the end of my story. Getting a divorce wasn't the end, like my life, even though it felt like it felt like a death and it felt like things were over. It really wasn't the end of the story. And it was the beginning of a new story. And how did I want to live this new story? Like, did I want to just live the length of it? No, I don't want to just live the length. I want to have a wide life. I want to do lots of things. I want to experience lots of things. And I want to truly experience the sad things and truly experience the happy things and not only, let myself be happy, which is impossible to do anyway. But I really wanted to allow myself to feel that sadness in the times when I was sad rather than trying to, perk up or whatever. Like I gave myself permission to be really sad with the knowledge that this was the beginning of something else.
And, I'm going to stop on that for 2 seconds or longer than 2 seconds, just because I love that point. And actually it's something I did yesterday. So much less dramatic or traumatic situation is, yesterday was the first day of school.
Yes.
Every year, sometimes it's joyous, sometimes it's conflicted, like, oh, I want more summer. No, go back to school. I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
But I too have a son born in 2002 as part of our twinning.
Yes.
And so he's 16 and he just started high school. It just kind of wrecked me a little. And so I just came home and I laid on the floor like a starfish. And I said out loud, I'm just going to feel all the feelings.
Yes.
I'm going to feel my feelings. And I felt the quiet and I felt the sad parts. I just laid there and just felt them. And then I went on a walk and, one of my friends texted me and said, hey, how are you? And then I started crying. I mean, I was just like, oh, fine, I'll feel all the things. Just get it out.
Yeah. I just think it's very healthy and I think it's important. And I think sometimes it's really, really hard to do too. Like,
it's not comfortable.
It's not, and it's not something that's simple or easy. And I think sometimes it's probably best done, with a professional if you can. Kind of depends on the situation too, I think, and the people making it through things. I think my parents have had a lot of ups and downs and their choice has been to stay together through all of that. And it's been interesting as, becoming an adult and watching them and thinking about my own story compared to their story and seeing the way that they have made it through things and that, some things you just have to let go of in order to keep moving forward. And I think that that's been a really good lesson for me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, like that's just a piece. I think it's a piece of the overall story. The other thing for us in terms of getting a divorce, and one of the things and I've talked about this before, is that, one of the things that Chris felt like is that we lacked a certain kind of chemistry, and which was the sexual chemistry. And at the time when he said that to me, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. What are you talking? We can work on that, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And the real honest truth is that we were really, really good friends and we work really well together, but we really were lacking that chemistry. And I don't think that I fully comprehended that until I met someone else who I really did have chemistry with, where the dynamic is completely different than it was before. And so that was that's another thing that you just kind of learn as you go along. You may not know it when you're 19 and 20 and, who knows?
Yeah. How old were you when you got married?
22 or 23. So, like a year out of college.
I mean, I don't want to keep twinning you so much, but I was 22 and a half when I got married.
No, I think we just have parallel. Yeah. No, and I was very much like, I really wanted to get married. I wanted to start that next piece of my life. Like I wanted to be married. I wanted to have kids. I wanted, to get on with it. Like, that's what I felt like about. And at that point in time, like I had no vision that, I would be I would have my own company or that I would do the kind of things that I'm doing now. Like I always thought, he would be the breadwinner and I would play a more traditional female role, which I think if I would have known myself or if I would have paid more attention to myself better, like I would have known that that was never going to be the case. But it's interesting to think back on it too.
How old were your kids when you started your business?
I started gathering some income probably in 2005. So Simon would have been 3, right? And that's really early, even when for his diagnosis and things like that. I started scrapbooking when he was almost a year old. And so it wasn't very long after that I started doing things where I was gaining a little bit of income, but still not ever like, oh, this is going to turn into this whole other thing. Anna she wasn't born until 2009. So they're 7 years apart.
When's her birthday in 2009? Month?
February.
Okay. I've got a January daughter of 2009. It's no big deal. I'm just pointing it out.
Of course you do.
When you started your business, I mean, I feel like scrapbooking at that point was like in its heyday. Things were like,
it was.
If I'm going to make it sound like what it was off the hook.
It was completely different than it is now. So when I first started, there were, multiple magazines, there were stores, most towns had some kind of a local scrapbook store, which those barely exist any longer. When I first started, people were not using digital cameras.
Yeah.
That's like, in terms of the internet and all those sorts of things, like back during that time, it was completely just, things looked completely different. But it was probably a $3 billion industry at its high point. And lots of different manufacturers, different people, making products to sell to people that you could buy in those local stores or buy at Michael's and Joann's. And it's a lot smaller now. Most of those local scrapbook stores have closed. Most of them were also, I would say this is a big generalization, but they were run by hobbyists rather than people that just love scrapbooking. They decided they wanted to open a store.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah.
I think it was the same way here in Salt Lake.
That's right.
Which is also one of the epicenters of scrapbooking.
For sure. And I've been there many times because of that.
Yes.
Over time, the magazines folded, things changed. The internet changed things a lot, I would say, especially related to the magazines, which is very similar to other industries as well. And for me, I have just kind of continued to have an online presence. I started a blog in 2004. I did a variety of different things with different licensing opportunities up until about 4 years ago when I kind of changed my setup. And now I'm basically partnering with one company that makes all of my products and does my distribution and customer service. And so that has been a good setup for me in terms of kind of bringing everything all under one umbrella. And it's allowed me to really focus on the kind of products and projects that I want to do, which are really intentional, have a beginning and an end. Most of them, they're not like ongoing things where you feel like you're having to scrapbook all the time, stuff like that. But really, getting people to value their story too is a big piece of it for me.
Well, what's interesting to me is, of course, my first website also went up in 2004.
Of course it did.
Of course it did. At that point, it was called utahmama.com. And I started as a publishing company.
Yep.
And we had some magazines as well. And I think the thing I can hear in your story, and I sit and think about in mine too, is, I mean, that's a long time. That's what, if I'm doing my math right, it's 14 years of a business.
14. Yeah.
There's a lot of evolving
that
happens in 14 years. And when you own your own business, big businesses who can't adjust to the pace and scale of technology and change just go out of business. But when you're little and you've got nothing else to do but evolve and adapt, it's almost like your business plan changes every couple of years.
And I think that that's definitely what has happened for me. Lots of kind of pivoting and, sometimes doing things that may not have made as much sense, and other times like being right on the mark, and which is just a piece of the whole experience anyway, trying to find those places where I best connect with the audience and best connect with my community. And for me, because what I do is really personal most of the time, it's telling stories about myself and what's happening. It was definitely more challenging after we got divorced, and me kind of just figuring out like, what story am I telling now?
Yeah.
And then that changed again once Aaron and I got married, or when we got together, and he has 3 kids too. And so now I have 5 kids around here and kind of figuring out whose story, I'm always only telling my story, but how am I including this other cast of characters, right? And how does that play into the ways that I communicate with my community? It's an ongoing.
And even with kids getting older, right? Like you have to take a whole lot more into consideration when it comes to their privacy or what's their story to tell versus yours.
For sure.
It's an interesting evolution.
Yes. And that's definitely been the case with Simon specifically, who's my 16-year-old that has autism. He's definitely, functions at a bit of a higher level, but so he's aware. I mean, he understands, sees what I do, and he has his own interest in social media and those kinds of things and figuring out, what are the appropriate stories to tell. And I've always been really conscious of that. Like even when we were going through a divorce, it was never like I was never going to tell all of the stories. That was not what it was going to be. And I spent a lot of time thinking about how I wanted to tell specific stories and how I wanted to present it, which makes it crafted in a way, trying to focus on the lessons most often. What was the lessons I learned from this, or what are the lessons we're learning from, Simon and his IEP process, and what are the struggles right now? Definitely a lot easier when he was younger, I think, than it is now too.
Yeah. Well, and this concept of our lives, the stories of our lives, maybe being nothing we ever expected. Because as you say story, I remember the specific moment. My husband got in a huge car accident in 2010. And I got the phone call. He had been climbing in the Tetons with his friends. And I always worry until they're off the mountain. So he had called me and said, hey, we're off the mountain. I was like, great, put my phone away, turned it off, like I could relax. And we went to dinner at some Mexican restaurant. Well, I got out and I had these missed calls. And it was this thing where your mind my mind generally follows an irrational path. And so I'm trying to talk myself out of it as it goes. I'm like, that's a Wyoming number. I don't know it. Somebody's dead.
Yeah.
And then I get my voicemail. And it's a nurse from a hospital. And then I'm freaking out in my head. But I played it cool on the outside. I put my kids in my parents' car because I was to dinner with them. I got in my car. I called the nurse back and she told me, hey, your husband was in a head-on collision. He's in critical condition. He's broke his back. That's all I can tell you right now. It's all I know. And I drove home and I pulled off the side of the road into this church parking lot. And I just said out loud, this is not our story. This is not how this was supposed to go, and that's just kind of kept what going through my head. Like, this is not our story, but it was, and it's actually like a really important, beautiful piece of our story. Yeah. And that takes a while to get to that place too. But that was almost my first bit of denial was like, nah, this is not the story I wrote for us.
Yeah. Yep. That's real. It's super real for sure.
Yeah. Well, as time went on and your story changed, you started dating and bringing new people into the story. Talk to me about how dating as a grown-up, I think would have to be really different than dating when you're in high school or college, right? You are looking for very different things.
Yes. And I had a lot more things to protect.
Yes. Talk to me about how that all works.
So for me, the way that I personally approached it was that I said to myself, like, I didn't want to get into any of that until everything was taken care of with Chris. So I wanted papers signed. I wanted everything completely done before I would allow myself to even walk down that path or think about what that was going to look like. And I was definitely I know that there's some people who are like, I'm going to swear it off forever. And I didn't feel like that. I felt like there'll be something else, there'll be some other person, there'll be some other piece, somebody else I'll get to meet. And so it definitely took me a while to kind of get out of the, even after everything was done and the papers were signed, to even want to be social. I think, for me, it was really easy to just throw myself into work. I could work all the time. Anytime that the kids were with Chris, which that was a very brutal piece of it, was, having to have the kids go away. In the beginning, that was super hard. Now I'm like, peace out. Have a great day. I'll see you later.
I had a conversation with my friend the other day she's in probably the first year of her divorce. Yeah. And she has just gotten to that point where she's like, hey, I was just out of town with my kids for 2 weeks. Maybe it sounds bad to say, but when I dropped them off, I'm like, oh, I got a lot of stuff I got to get done. I'm going to bust a move. I need a minute.
Yep.
And that's actually a good thing.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, I think it's just the reality of once you get a divorce, then this is a piece of what happens for, for many people, not for everybody, depending on your situation. But, they had a very safe place to go to. They go with him and I'm not concerned. I'm happy that they're with him. He takes good care of them. That takes a lot off of me worrying or fearing whatever those fears that I'm going to make up in my head are.
Yeah.
But anyway, after a certain point in time, I was getting together with girlfriends, which that was really good. And, that was part of the length and the width thing. Like, I'm not going to sit in my house all the time. I'm not going to work all the time, which is what I could do, but I'm not going to do that. And so I dated a few people before I met Aaron, but not very many. It was not a super long process for me. So I met one guy just at our local pool who I dated very briefly, but that was so exciting. Like the first person or the first, like this whole other, like I can just remember that feeling in my body was very exciting. But not very long after that, I was like, yeah, this is not going to work. And this is not, for a million different reasons.
That was fun for a minute.
That was fun for a minute because what it did is it kind of like broke the seal. It sounds really weird to say, but you know what I mean? Like it tore off the scar, right? Or whatever. It was the beginning. Yeah. I did it. I met somebody, whatever. We had fun. It was great. And then I ended up reconnecting with a college friend who was somebody that I had always really adored and like had spent time in college telling my friends that like this was the guy I was going to be with. I really liked him. He was really fun. He has a really good friend group. And so I spent some time with him, which was very fun and exciting as well. And that lasted for, 6 months or something like that. And then didn't work out. And then he ended up actually getting married to the person that he dated after me, which was exciting because he hadn't been married before. So he was like in his 40s and hadn't been married. And totally somebody that I still really enjoy. And then after that, I actually had a friend who called me and left a message and said, I think you should meet this guy. He's going through something similar to you. I think he could use a friend. He has his own business. Here's some of the details about him. And just, focusing on this idea, I think he could really use a friend right now. And I was like, okay. So then Katie, who works with me, it's my right hand, does everything.
And at that point, did she say how good looking he was?
No, she didn't.
I mean, and hint, he's going to be called your super hot boyfriend.
Yeah, no, but we immediately went on Facebook and looked at him, of course, because that's what you can do now. And so we looked at all his pictures and he was very attractive. And so then I just sent him a message on Facebook and said, we like friended each other. And then I sent him a message and said, our friend Kim said that you could use a friend right now. Do you want to get together for coffee or whatever? And that was the beginning of what it is now. I mean, from that point on, we were seeing each other all the time and just we really enjoyed each other. We had the opportunity to do a bunch of different travel because we both were in these situations where we had really capable parents on the other side, to be able to take care of the kids. And so we kind of had what I would call like just a really fun, awesome opportunity to get to know each other without our kids around, which I think was really important for us. And then kind of slowly did some joint group things all together. And it wasn't very long after that, like even our first date, which we met at a movie theater, which is a kind of funny story of my friend Katie and I were going to see the Twilight Marathon. This is like the day that the last Twilight movie came out.
You know what? True confession over here too. We were
Did you go?
Of course I did. And like, I was embarrassed of it.
No, we were totally embarrassed, but we didn't care. I mean, we were embarrassed, but it was like, we were still going to go.
There was this best moment because it's been so long since I've let go of my Twilight obsession. I can't remember which movie this was in, but there's a point where Edward and Bella are running through the forest in like white clothes.
Yes.
Everybody in the theater just started laughing. It was like so horribly done. But then there's another part where Jake the werewolf
takes his shirt off.
Grown women are gasping and screaming, right? And I'm just like, the dude's probably 17, guys. Like, put your clothes back on, please.
That was amazing. Yeah. So we had bought tickets and we were like, we're going all day. We're going to go watch all of these movies. And it was like the one opportunity for him to come because he was going out of town. And I said, here's the deal. My friend Katie and I are going to this thing. Don't judge us that we're going to this. This is before I had met him in person. And I said, I'll just buy you a ticket. You come if you want. You come anytime. I'll just meet you out there. And he ended up coming.
We'll be here all day.
Yes, we'll be here all day. And he ended up coming for like the last 3 movies. And so we sat there, and he hadn't read the books. He didn't know anything about it, but he just sat there.
Oh my gosh.
And which is even funnier now because it's totally not something that he would watch generally. But he sat there, and between each movie, we would like chat, and we would talk about what was happening for him and what was happening for me, and me giving him suggestions and on ways to deal with what he was going through. And then Katie's sitting on my other side, and she's like just watching this whole thing unfold. And she'd been there through everything with Chris. Like, she's worked for me since Anna was 6 months. So she was my nanny first. Now she works for me in my business. But it was just an amazing, like, from that moment on, I was like, I want to be around you. I want you. I want to, like all of that kind of stuff mixed in. So yeah, it's been really amazing. I mean, there are pieces of him that are similar to Chris, and then there's pieces that are really different. He works from home. Also, we have a very similar pace in our day, which is fairly, there's sometimes where it's really intense and sometimes where it's really laid back. And we just kind of have a nice flow to our lives. I mean, there's a lot of logistical stuff with 5 kids and in and out and who's here and who's not here. But over time, that's gotten a lot better, which all has to go back to that whole letting go thing, letting go of the stuff that doesn't really matter so that we can focus on the stuff that does.
You're listening to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher. We'll be back right after this.
It feels like there's never enough time to do it all. The kids keep growing, and sure, you keep taking photos of every little magical, maniacal moment. But then what? Get photos off your phone and into your hands with Chatbooks. Automatically create beautiful 60-page photo books in minutes, right from your camera roll and social media, starting at just $10 with free shipping. Keep calm and mom on with Chatbooks.
And now back to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher.
So how did you decide to introduce him to your kids, and what was that integration like?
Yeah. So I was just actually looking at pictures again recently. So we introduced all of them in a very light way where we just were like, these are friends, this is my friend Aaron and these are his kids and blah, 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 and kind of having them come over here and us going over to their house. And his youngest daughter is 9, so the same age as my daughter. And they were immediately kind of 2 peas in a pod and really enjoyed each other. And then we have 2 other boys that are 11 and 13. And those 2 got along really well with Simon, and they all like Legos and Star Wars, and they just had similar interests. So it kind of worked really well that they were all within the same age. So we did things with them, and they knew, after a certain point in time that we were dating, and, that was a piece of the story. We got married 5 years to the day that we met. And they moved in here the summer before that. So 2 summers ago is when they moved in here, and we got married last November. So there became a certain point in time where he was like, I think I'm going to buy a different house. And I was like, that does not make any sense. Why would you buy another house? Like, you should move in here, and that will simplify a lot of things, blah, blah, blah. But we definitely, it was really important to us that we felt like the kids were going to be okay, and more than okay, that they were going to be able to thrive in this situation, and that there weren't any major red flags of them not getting along or anybody being really upset about this new phase. Like, they were all really on board. It was like, what do you think about having them move in? And my kids are like, oh my God, that's amazing. They don't really understand exactly what it's going to be like, but their initial feelings are really positive about it, and the same on his side. And it's been really, really good. And I think part of it is that they're not all here all the time.
Yeah. So that everybody kind of gets to take their space.
Yep. And especially for the girls, like, they are both, sometimes they're here and sometimes they're not here. And sometimes one of them is just here, and they have a room together, which has worked out, I think, pretty good overall. And the boys all have their own rooms. And so it's been, it's a continual kind of taking everybody's temperature and how's everybody doing. And just like you would do in a normal situation. There's only one that kind of wishes that their parents were still together. And so we're sensitive to that and try to, think about how that feels and those kinds of things as well. Because none of us, and I'm saying us, like including the other parents and their other spouses or boyfriends or whatever, like nobody else had split families. So we're kind of like first generation of split family. And, we don't know I don't know what that feels like to be in that situation. So.
Well, and you guys have done an amazing job. Even if I look at how you just did your wedding and your honeymoon. Now, this is me. We haven't seen each other for 5 years. So this is me following you on social media, right?
Yeah.
I think you guys just got married at your house with just the kids. Tell me how that all went.
So that was amazing. That ended up being a really, really good choice. So we went back and forth between what do we want this to be like? Do we want to have a destination wedding? What was really going to be meaningful for this event? And what we decided on was to just do it here at the house with nobody else. So we had just us and the kids, and we had a friend of ours that performed the ceremony, that was awesome. And then we hired a caterer to come to the house and cook Thanksgiving dinner for us because we were going to leave the next morning and take all of the kids and go to Mexico and have a family moon instead of a honeymoon. And I think part of that for us was that Aaron and I have done a lot of traveling on our own already. So that didn't feel like it was as big of a deal. And we had other trips actually already planned where he and I were just going by ourselves. Yeah. So we were like, we're going to take everybody and we're going to have this be just this, wedding that happens on one day. And then the next morning we're going to leave and we're going to get up and we're going to go to Mexico. And it was awesome. It was very quiet and calm and it was no stress, and we had a photographer come and that was really fun, made it really about the 7 of us coming together and less about the party, less about even external family. We just didn't have to worry about anybody else except for the 7 of us. And I think that was definitely the right choice for us at this time in our life. I don't know that I would have chosen that first time around. I think it was easier because I've already done a big wedding. I've already done the big party, which was what Chris and I wanted. I mean, that was our focus, was like, yes, we're going to have this kick-ass party. Whereas this time we wanted it to be quiet. We wanted it to be intimate. We wanted it to just be us. And I think that was really cool for the kids too.
I mean, spying on you on the grams, it looked beautiful and like such an amazing choice.
Yeah, it really felt like it solidified, this as the beginning of the next phase. And so that was really good. Yeah, it was fun.
So if you were talking to somebody who was looking at blending their own family or in the midst of that kind of situation, what's the best advice you would give to them?
I think my best advice goes back to like identifying the things that are not worth getting upset about. And identifying the things that you can let go of that are really not that big of a deal. And for me, I can pinpoint different, points along the timeline of even when we were considering, like we talked about moving in together a long time before we did it. Like it was definitely an ongoing discussion. And it was a lot about me saying, this is going to be too much. The logistics are going to be too crazy. I'm too type A. I can't handle, that the way that they handle their kids is a lot more in and out, where Chris and I are very scheduled and we do a longer period of time. And I was really worried about all of that. And it's actually been a really amazing growing piece for me to learn that I could adapt to that and that the pieces that I thought were really important actually weren't that big of a deal. What I would say to somebody is, figuring out how to identify which are the things that are really a big deal, especially if you have, there's these ex-spouses on the other side, which we just kind of consider everybody family. His ex-wife is family and Chris's family, and everybody's just kind of in this big group, but that doesn't mean that we all agree on everything. So when we have disagreements, like when Chris and I have disagreements, or when Aaron, and his ex-wife's name was Aaron too, when they have disagreements, and then Aaron and I come back together, it's figuring out, okay, what's actually important in here? Because my initial response often is to be like, what the hell? Where then I'm like, okay, take it down 25 notches. And this is really not that big of a deal. Let's wait, I'm going to let this is going to go. This is not even anything that we need to worry about. And we'll worry about something else in the future if we really need to worry about it. So kind of, it's a picking your battle kind of thing. And I would say, if at all possible, if you can show love to the other people, showing love to Chris and showing love to Aaron's ex-wife, and, finding ways that we can all be kind to each other. I think that is really helpful for the kids, to help them feel safe and secure, and that it's okay, right? That this whole situation is okay. It's maybe not ideal. It may not be how we all envisioned it was going to be, but that they are all being loved exponentially, actually. So,
and even if it takes you some time to get there, you can still get there.
yep. And I would say expect that it takes time. I would also say that I think it's important to recognize that you may not like there is definitely a sensitive topic related to how you feel about your own kids versus how you may feel about your new spouse's kids. And I think giving yourself time to fall in love with them, giving yourself time to get to know them or to learn what's awesome about them and figure out ways to celebrate that. I feel like you shouldn't have the expectation that that's going to happen immediately and that that's okay. And that that's all part of this process of kind of coming together as a family. Is for me specifically, you know, how can I identify the things that are really amazing about each one of these kids? And then how can I celebrate it? How can I focus on those pieces of the whole story too? So
I love that. There's so much about this that takes time. Like you're human and it takes time.
Yep.
And even with the kids, does it sound just weird to say making those kids yours? I mean, it's making them yours too.
Yeah. I mean, I think
really pulling a new family together.
Yes. Well, and from my standpoint, I think one of the things that is always interesting for me is that, again, it would be really different if our ex-spouses were not really quality people. Right. And that if I didn't feel like they were being loved and nurtured and getting love on, you know, when they're not within our four walls, like I think I would feel really different about it. So for me, it's always kind of been this, you know, figuring out how much of it is just the seven of us, but then also how much of it actually encompasses all of these other people too, and figuring out what that looks like.
Home just got a whole lot bigger.
And I'm like, bring it on. It's good.
Tell me this, you kind of brought on a wellness focus in I don't know, the last couple years?
Yeah, like a year ago. Yep.
How would all these preceding events, would you say that built you to a place where you're like, oh my gosh, I need to shift and look at my own health? Or, I mean, how did you get?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I also had some acute health related things that made it come to the surface more. I think all of the experiences kind of add up to wanting to be well.
Yeah.
Right. And wanting to be mentally well and wanting to be physically well. But I had a couple things happen, one of which I got blood clots, which was really bizarre. I had gone to Bali and we came back and my leg was sore. I had been taking birth control, which I had, you know, for most of my adult life. And my leg was sore and it was still sore, you know, 5 days after I got home. And I was like, okay, this is something, not just a pulled muscle. And so I went to the ER and ended up that I had a blood clot in my leg and they started me on blood thinner and then gave me this one little bit of advice, which was, if you feel weird at all, feel shortness of breath or anything, you should come back immediately. And I'm like, all right, great. So now I'll go and create that for myself as I think about
how weird I feel all the time.
I feel so weird. Okay. But I went home and the next morning I was walking up the stairs and I was talking on the phone and I definitely felt a shortness of breath. And so I went back to the ER, told the people at the counter that I swore to God I wasn't crazy, but that I was just there yesterday, and ended up, they took me back and I had a CAT scan and I had clots in my lungs too. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up staying in the hospital for a couple of days and they think that it, you know, was potentially something related to the flying and the birth control and whatever, but I've done lots of that in my life. So
yeah.
No more birth control for me.
Yeah.
But that was a big enough scare, you know, of kind of like, what am I doing? What's happening? And after that, when I had like a week, you know, your week after visit of being in the hospital, I had a different doctor than my normal doctor. And he was going back over my chart and he was talking about how I have a goiter, which is like an enlarged thyroid, which I've had hypothyroidism since probably after Simon was born. So a long time, and have been taking medication for that. And as he was going back over my chart, he was like, oh, you have Hashimoto's. What? Nobody ever told me I have Hashimoto's. What is Hashimoto's? You know, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, it's, you know, autoimmune disease and it just creates, you know, can be a piece of the hypothyroidism. And I'm like, okay. But I went home and I immediately like Googled it and was looking it up because I'd already been a little bit aware of autoimmune conditions and started reading more about kind of a holistic approach to having autoimmune issues. And could that help some of my symptoms of feeling tired? And, you know, even when they look at my levels for hypothyroidism, they say your levels are fine. The amount of medication you're taking is fine, but I still feel tired and blah, blah, blah. So that was really kind of the jumping off point of that was a year ago in June, I think, of me saying, I want to take better care of myself. I would like to document this because I know from other life experiences that documenting things help me to stay on track, and it helps me communicate and kind of figure out what is this story that's actually happening to me. And so I just started like taking pictures of my food and started, taking pictures when I was walking or when I was doing exercise. And I started doing more yoga and started doing bar 3 and just kind of making that a bigger piece of my overall story, and found some people like Against All Grain, which is Danielle Walker. I changed my diet. I went gluten-free, and I've been gluten-free for a year now. I was dairy-free for a long time. I'm kind of having a little bit of dairy right now. Just a refocus, I would say, on that. Because I was somebody that swam competitively in college and then didn't do anything for 20 years. Like I was like, I'm done. I'm done with this exercise thing. I'm super burned out from doing double practices every day, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't.
I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah. And that's maybe not a good choice. But anyway, so that's kind of the beginning of that. And that's given me another avenue to be able to talk about that and have a specific space for that.
And I love that account because our favorite workouts are the same, except for you say bar 3 and I say Pilates. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they're quite different.
Yeah, I think that there's probably some similarities.
I'm a walking and yoga and Pilates person at this point. Like, I don't want to do anything that's going to like twist my ankle.
Yep. That's pretty much what I feel like about it. And I think one of the things for me too is that Aaron is fairly health conscious, and that has been a good, and he's not in a, in an obtrusive way. Like he's just a good cheerleader and a good encourager. And that's impacted the way that all the kids eat. And
and that's how it is at our house too. I should mention my husband is still alive after that car accident.
Yes, which is good.
And he's not paralyzed or anything. Like we made it. And part of how he takes care of himself is hot yoga, because it keeps his scar tissue really stretched out.
Interesting.
Have you been to a hot yoga class?
I have not been to a hot yoga class. I think at some point in time I will do it. I have a little bit of fear. I've created a story for myself that is something about related to me passing out.
Same. I felt the same way. And it took forever, and I finally gave in. And last week I went to a hot yoga class. It's hot. I mean, I didn't pass out, but we get to a point where they're like, okay, like move you into Shavasana, like the part that's usually at the end of a class. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I did it. I made it. That wasn't even bad. And I'm like laying there and I'm like, sweet, we're wrapping this thing up. Well, come to find out, they do like 2 or 3 of those. That was like the third of the way done point.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
So mentally that kind of killed me the rest of the time, because I'm like, I thought I was done. And then I'm like laying on my face on a hot yoga mat and I'm just pissed. Like,
I totally get it.
I got to go back with different expectations, but it wasn't physically as bad as I thought it would be, but mentally that really got me.
Yeah. I'm thinking I may try it this winter. Like I like the idea of doing that when it's cold outside. So that would be a good thing for me to do just as a stretch, I think, of something that have some underlying fear of, that I should just do it anyway, probably.
Yeah. Embrace it.
Yeah.
Now, another quick thing, I know we're getting kind of to the end, but I have to bring this up. You mentioned your favorite afternoon snack is almonds and apples, as is mine. So, and you said, or a piece of chocolate. So I'm about to get nuts with you right now. Did you feel that?
I totally did.
I did air quotes with my hand.
I totally got you.
So I make this awesome chocolate coconut almond butter. Oh. You get like your Kirkland, like your Costco almonds, you put them in like a blend tech or whatever, power blender, right? Some coconut oil, some cocoa, and a little bit of salt.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
And then the sweetness comes from putting it on the apple. Yeah. It is dessert, dude. It is the best snack in the whole wide world. So I'm going to put this recipe in the show notes.
Do it. Tell me how much cocoa to put in there.
Yeah, it's like 2 tablespoons. I'll send you the recipe too.
Yeah.
But have you done a Whole30 yet?
I have not done a technical Whole30. I've done, like I said, gluten-free, dairy-free. I've actually done an autoimmune paleo.
Yeah, I have too.
Yeah, which is, I think, even more restrictive than Whole30. And I did that right after I figured out that I actually had Hashimoto's. That was good. It was good for me.
Yeah, so the ingredients in this are compliant with most of those intense diets because it's just those 4 things.
Sweet.
I know on Whole30 they get a little strict about like combining things into a thing.
Yes.
Which I sometimes, if I do that thing, I ignore it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
I'll make my almond banana muffin. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yep, I gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to make you grab your favorite quote that you told me about, because when I read this, I thought this is a nice place to wrap. Will you just read for us like your favorite quote?
Yes. And so this quote, this woman's name, and I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce her last name, but it's Mary Jean, maybe Iron.
That sounds right.
Ion. Yes. Okay. Irion, maybe. Yeah, you're probably right. Okay. So this is what Mary Jean says. Normal day. Let me be aware of the treasure you are. Let me learn from you, love you, bless you before you depart. Let me not pass by you in a quest of some rare and perfect tomorrow. Let me hold you while I may, for it may not always be so. One day I shall dig my nails into the earth, or bury my face in the pillow, or stretch myself taut, or raise my hands to the sky and want, more than all the world, your return.
It's so, so good.
Yeah, and that's one, like, that one's been around. I mean, like, that's one that I've looked at a million times, probably even like when Simon was getting diagnosed and, you know, just thinking about simple pieces of what, you know, how do we embrace just the regular everyday stuff? Like when it is boring, like you said, or when it is normal, when we're not in trauma or when we're not in grief. Remembering to really celebrate those everyday moments is something that I've tried to do for a long time.
The normal day, just to be grateful for the normal day. I love, love, love that. So where can people find you online?
So you can find me. My regular general website is allieedwards.com. And I have a blog, I have a shop, I have classrooms, like all that's kind of the hub of everything. And actually one thing that I should say, I just did a post, I think earlier, well, it was probably last week, where I was talking about wanting to get back to my roots of blogging. And this is probably a whole other topic, but wanting to write more in the way that I used to write. And I kind of haven't done that for a number of years. It's been more communicating with customers, you know, basic kind of commercial sort of thing. So I'm going to try to write a little bit more. That's kind of one of my goals. But other than that, Instagram is one of my favorites. So at Allie Edwards. And like you said, the wellness account is AE_wellness. And I have a couple of other crafty related accounts. If people want to check those out, they can find those off the main Instagram account.
Well, and then you also have a series of workshops you do every year called One Little Word. Will you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a full year workshop. And One Little Word is that concept of picking a word for the year. And I've been doing it, I think, since 2007 or something.
And what's your word this year?
My word this year is actually space. So the idea of asking myself questions related to space, to my personal space, to the amount of space that I take up in the world, to like physical space in our house. Those are all the things that I've kind of been focusing on this year. So I pick one word just like that, and then I live with it for the year, and I find ways to make it visible. I find ways to be curious about it. I find ways to ask myself questions, and, you know, it's definitely a personal development sort of angle on that. But I do a workshop that lasts throughout the year, and we'll have registration opening for that again in November for next year. And each month there's just a simple prompt that is some sort of way to connect with your word, to invite people back into remembering what their word is. Because a lot of people pick a word and then they forget what it is.
I will not forget. Now, also tell me about December Daily.
Yeah. So the other big project that we have coming up is my annual holiday project, and it's December Daily is the name of it. And it is a memory keeping project that lasts 25 days. Some people do it longer. I do it from December 1st through the 25th, where I tell one story per day. And we have a whole series of products to support that project, the albums. We have a kit to make it really simple to be able to capture the stories of what's happening in your family in December. That one we have, that actually the products for that go on sale on September 6th.
Oh my gosh. So just
coming up.
Right around the corner, probably the week this airs. Right. And we didn't even plan that.
Amazing. Yes. And things sell out. So if you're interested, you should go check out that project.
They can find that all on allieedwards.com. Is that the best place?
Yep. For sure. Yep. That's the hub. Yeah.
Well, I really could talk to you for hours, long lost sister.
Yes. Love chatting with you. Thank you for reaching out.
Yeah, this has been so good. And let's get together in real life soon. But until that day comes, I wish us both just tons of normal days.
Yes. Bring it on.
All right. We'll talk to everybody next week.
Listen, before you go, I feel like I just need to clarify a few things. Like the things about me getting into fist fights. And by fights, it was just 2. And one didn't even involve fists. It involved a crane kick. Like, it was the 80s. It was fine. Everybody was doing it. I just needed to see if I could execute. I might also have been selling karate lessons in my basement dojo. No big deal. Like, it was super official. I had masking tape on the floor. Everybody's names were there. And I had perfected my crane kick in my street fight. So, lest anyone was worried that I was roving the streets of Salt Lake City, beating kids up, I mean, it was just in the name of the dojo. Anyway, remember, be sure to click on the show notes. I wasn't joking around. I've got pictures of bowl cuts, both mine and Allie's. Allie kind of had like a tail, almost like she was working on a mullet. It's really good. We also have a post that we've put together with our favorite Dave Matthews Band songs. We take this seriously. It's basically everything you need in your life right now, so be sure to check it out, and we'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Today's Mama podcast with Rachel Hersher. To find out more, go to todaysmama.com. That's today's, MAMA.com. Today's Mama, connecting moms and families with the best of today.